Culture wars breaking out of Google. A 10-page memo from an anonymous software engineer now circulating at the tech giant, basically criticizing Google's web company's diversity push. They're basically calling to replace it with policies that encourage, quote, ideological diversity, meaning differences of opinion and thought. This techie states that Google's left bias has created a politically correct culture that shames dissenters into silence. He argues that more men have jobs like his than women because of biological differences. Person pushing back against programs offered by Google to help underrepresented racial and gender minorities. Former senior Google engineer Jonathan Zunger responding with an equal and opposite manifesto, saying the traits that this current worker describes as, quote, female are the core traits of engineering success. Let's take a look at Google's parent company, Alphabet, closing the day in the red. It is up year over year. Back with us, Ashley Pratte and Danielle McLaughlin. Ashley, this comes at a bad time for Google. The Labor Department is now investigating pay differences at Google between genders. Your thoughts?
Yes, I do think that there's a real need for women in the tech industry and for engineering in general. And I do think that when things like this happen, it does prevent women from wanting to get involved in them. But what I will say is when companies take on diversity initiatives, they tend to do it in the wrong way. And they tend to do that by almost saying to women like myself, you know, we're doing this because we have to rather than you belong here. And I do think that that's the problem when you look at a lot of these diversity initiatives. But I would love to see more women getting involved in tech. But I do think Google moving forward needs to really think strategically about how they're going to message to women if they really want to diversify the culture there.
All right, so this is one guy at one company, Danielle, the vice president of engineering at Google, saying he betrays his own stereotyping and biases when he says, you know, men and women all act women act the same way, they behave the same way, they feel and think the same way, all women, and all men the same. I mean, the vice president is saying he himself is biased in his own thinking about it. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think, honestly, that first anonymous memo, we haven't actually seen it, we've seen excerpts, really demonstrates, I think, a misunderstanding of what engineering really is. And
You're an engineer, right?
I was an engineer, a junior engineer, but an engineer nonetheless. And what Mr. Zunger said in his, the companion piece, or the rebuttal piece, is exactly right. Because the highest form of expression in engineering is to create solutions for humans, and that requires empathy. That requires an understanding of the way that the world works and the way that the things that people want. Two examples. Google Glass, disaster. Great technology, bad application. The iPhone, okay, great, a touch screen, but what it did for our lives and our expectations, it was world-changing.
Ashley, Google, let's get to that statement again from Google's Vice President for Diversity issuing a response. Here's what it says in part. Like many of you, I found that this memo's advanced incorrect assumptions about gender. It's not a viewpoint I or this company endorses, promotes, or encourages. Actually, this is a VP of Diversity and Inclusion. But, you know, people can have differences of opinion and ideology, right?
Yes, and I think that this is something we see on college campuses, we see in places of work. It's not just in the tech industry, and I think that that's something, as we look at it as a society as a whole, we really need to be cognizant of. We can't be suppressing different opinions and, you know, free speech in different workplaces, and I think that that's what needs to be touched on here, just a little bit.
Ashley, Danielle, thanks so much. Thanks for joining tonight. Come back soon.